Here's how we're going to start off. And this is based on something that really happens in Quantico, Virginia. The Marines bring business people in and they do ethics training. Okay? So this actually happens. We're going to do it right here in this room in Nampa rather than have to go all the way to Quantico to do it. So look around. I want you to assemble yourselves into 3 to 4 people per team. And you need at least one woman on the team. All right? So just look around. You don't need to get out of your seat. At 2:30 in the morning, an explosion goes off to wake you up and get you out of your tent. You are part of an elite military team, and your job is to go and make contact with a village priest and start building a relationship in the Middle East. So the explosion goes off, you get out of the tent, and you and your team start walking. Daylight hits. You crest over the top of a hill. You see a little waft of smoke. You figure that's the camp where the priest is waiting for us. We're going to go in and start building relationships. As you walk up, you can tell people are happy. It's some kind of an event. You get closer, you see it's a wedding. And as you get closer, there's one person who's not happy. It's a woman. She's tied, bound. You figure out this is an arranged wedding. And as you walk up, you see the priest, and the woman is being dragged into a tent. And this is all happening very fast for you and your team. So the woman gets inside the tent, and then she escapes. She runs out of the tent. She runs up to a female member of your team. She hides behind that female member, begging in her native voice, "Please help me." The priest gets in your face. He's expecting you. He says, "This is perfectly legal. You get out of here. You are ruining a big celebratory day." What are you going to do? Send Quantico through. You don't need to move. You're fine. Just stay in your seats. Okay. So the business people in Quantico, here's what happened. The business people in Quantico, they said, "You know what? This is part of the culture. It's perfectly legal here. There's nothing we can do to stop this." And so they backed away. Now what happens, and this story was detailed in USA Today just a couple weeks ago. It was fascinating read to see what happened. So they have a conversation afterwards. And the Marine leader of this group who was teaching the ethics course, he said, "So you walk away. What happened to the woman?" And the business people said, "Well, she was raped." But they said, "We tried to prevent it." What end? It's part of the culture. It's perfectly legal. It was what that Marine said that just drove to the heart. He said, "But this is the first time you had an opportunity to do something about it." Whoa. Everything we do as business people matters. Every decision we make matters. That's the extreme. That's the big thing. I was in Fred Meyer, and I had gone there because my wife had called on my way home from work, and she says, "Dale, I need you to stop by and pick up a few things." That's dangerous. I said, "Well, would you text me a list?" So she texted me the list. One of the things she had on the list were almonds. So I figured, okay, I'm going to be in the bulk section, and I looked at the almonds. $14 a pound. What? You kidding me? So I looked next door on the bulk aisle, and there's the sunflower seeds, $4 a pound. So frugal, but I'm going to make sure about this. So, I'm sitting here with the phone to my ear, and I'm having a discussion. Well, I can get sunflower seeds for $4 a pound, or just a little bit of almonds. So what is it going to be in other things? And as I'm sitting there on the phone with my wife, this guy walks up. He's probably in his 50s, well-dressed. He walks right by me like he owns the store. He goes down to the chocolate-covered something bin in the bulk foods aisle. He opens it up. He reaches his hand in, grabs it, tosses it back, and walks off. The ethical guy in me says, you just stole from the store. The germaphobe in me is just absolutely going crazy. And you know what? I have to admit, that day, I failed. I didn't seize the opportunity to make a difference in that very small way because I just stood silent while the guy stole from the store. The courageous thing to do, if you're the business guy who's going to protect the woman out of the tent, the guy who's standing there in the aisle, hey, you just stole from the store. Now, you're not going to put it back, but let's make arrangements to pay for that, no matter how small it is. And I'm always thinking, I have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old at home. And so I'm always thinking about them and how do we create that culture where right is right, and we're going to stand up for what's right. We have this prayer, and I immediately went to the prayer. We pray almost every night. God, give us the wisdom to know what is right and the courage to do what is right. And we add a little something in there, especially when nobody's watching. What does this mean for us as business people? Number one, everything you do really does matter. I'm going to lay out a case for that soon. Number two, we all wake up with the intention to do the right thing day in and day out. I'm absolutely convinced as I look around this room, you really do. You woke up with the intention today to do what is right. And you set out to do that in your business. I'm going to be an ethical business. Here's the thing. We judge ourselves by our intent. We judge others by their actions. Meaning we're judged by our actions all the time. The other thing that's working against us as business people, that anytime a minority, just a fraction of a percent, do the wrong thing, they get their names in the paper, headline on the front page, top story on the newscast. And then that colors the perspective of the public when it comes to business. And it creates a false perception that business is bad, business is vilified. Because the bad guy gets all the press. The good guy, the majority, everybody in this room's going out with the intention to do the right thing day in and day out. And your actions prove it. So, it's gotten us into a very expensive position. Small Business Administration did a study. They took a look at the cost of federal regulations on business in the United States. They found that business in the U.S. pays $1.75 trillion per year complying with federal regulations. As small business people, it hits us even harder. So the Small Business Administration dug in, they looked at it a little deeper, and they found that the small business pays $10,500 per employee per year complying with federal regulations. What happens when there's a headline in the newspaper, somebody does something bad? Another rule comes down the pike. The dollar keeps, the cash register for your compliance keeps going up and up and up. Ring, ring, ring. So I'm going to make the case today that every little single thing we do really does matter when we talk about doing right, being ethical in our business, and really going above and beyond. Because the question is, do you want a license to operate? Whether it's just your name on the list at the Secretary of State's office, or if you're in a business that requires some kind of competency licensing. Do you want a license to operate where you just do the bare minimum and you're legal, you follow the rules? Or do you want a license to lead? think together we want a license to lead, to do what's right, to show people that we really are in this because we're going to go to a higher standard, a higher level. Frank Luntz wrote the book, Win: The Key Principles to Take Your Business from Ordinary to Extraordinary. And what he writes, I thought, just captures this concept of getting past a license to operate, doing the bare minimum, following the rules. I don't need to do anything else. I'm legal. And getting to that place where we have a license to lead. He wrote, "This is the era of integrity, of voluntarily going above and beyond federal guidelines, ethics codes, ground rules, and moral obligations. It's the era of continual improvement and never settling for the status quo. No matter your past successes or failures, communicating that you're always striving to do more and do it better, get this, wins the hearts, minds, and consumer dollars. Profit's a noble thing, especially when you do it right. No one trusts the government to get anything right, so if all you're doing is complying with minimum standards, then you immediately wrap yourself up in the government's shroud of ineptitude. You must go higher." So what does that look like? Every little thing you do matters. Have you ever heard of Ed Lorenz? Ed Lorenz, back in 1963, he's a mathematician and a meteorologist. And he had this crazy idea. And so he presented this theory to the New York Academy of Sciences in 1963. And he was laughed off the stage. Literally laughed out of the room. His idea was that if a butterfly flaps its wings, molecules of air interact. And that butterfly flapping its wings in South America could set off a storm in Texas. It's called the butterfly effect. There have been movies and books. Well, in the 1990s, a group of researchers, physicists got together and they said, you know what, okay, so Ed Lorenz was pretty much laughed off the stage back in the 1960s. But we've been looking at this and people have been enthralled with this crazy idea. So they started testing it. And you know what? They couldn't prove it wrong. Any matter that created movement they saw had this effect. So what was Ed Lorenz's theory laughed off a stage in the 1960s became a law in the 1990s. And it was actually called the law of sensitive dependence on initial conditions. And it works with human beings as well. And I started thinking about this and I thought, you know what? Somebody stopped me in a coffee shop, and that happens a lot. Stopped me in a coffee shop with a story. And they said, we were going to a large church at the time, and they said, you know, you probably don't recognize us, but we sit behind you and your wife at church. And we notice the way you treat each other. Put your arm around her. We can see that you really love each other. And I thought, wow, people really watch all the time. Our actions do matter. Every little thing matters. Every single little action matters. Doing the right things, people are watching all the time. It matters continually. It was proven to me just in that one small example. And I realized that everywhere I go, everything I do, somebody's probably watching. It's setting an example. And the same is true for each and every person in this room. As business leaders in Canyon County, people are watching. So the question is, do you just say, I've got a license to operate, I'm living by the law, everything's fine? Or do you say, I want a license to lead and set the example for doing things the right way? Because actions matter. So, the 3 challenges added today, if you've got the handout in front of you, we're going to wrap up with these 3 challenges on the personal side and 3 challenges for the business side of things. First and foremost, make and keep commitments to yourself. This is the toughest one, but I'm convinced when we do this well at the personal level, with myself first, and then with my family, then with my friends, then with my coworkers and colleagues, this is a huge trust and character builder. I discovered something amazing just a couple weeks ago. I really try to get up early in the morning, get the workout in, read. So, what's the first thing I like to do when that alarm goes off at 4:30 a.m.? Smash. I don't have to open my eyes. I know right where that thing's at. I can hit the snooze button. So I thought, how am I going to get myself past this so that when I make the commitment the night before that I'm going to get up, I actually get up? I took a small note and I wrote, before I went to bed, I wrote, I will get out of bed at 4:30. And I put it on my desk. That was the last thing I saw before I went to bed. You know what happened when the alarm went off the next morning? I didn't have a choice. I did not have a choice. I knew that last night I had written the commitment down that I was going to get up. And I had to go up and get that note off my desk, throw it away, and do what I was going to do at 4:30 that morning. So the first step in this idea of doing the right things is first to make and keep commitments. It's one of the strongest actions we have, both personally and professionally. Next, it's about being a person of your word. I think back to that prayer. This is another case. You're going to be a person of your word, especially when nobody's looking, especially when it's hard. That's the true test of character in these situations. People are watching. And then finally, be open and transparent. I'm going to hit this one twice, but there's some research out about this idea of being vulnerable, which is in that category of being open and transparent. Her name's Brené Brown, if you want to read up on it. We don't have time to go into it deeply. Some of you have heard her talk about vulnerability. But this idea of transparency and honesty in our lives, it really is what she says, it helps you be a whole person. It leads to happiness. It's a huge trust builder with those around you. Now, we focus on those things on the personal level. It's naturally going to carry through to the business side of things. On the business side of things, 3 specific challenges for you to keep in mind as you look at what you do and how you operate. And first and foremost, it's principles-based leadership, which gets us past a license to operate and gets us into that place of having a license to lead. I have a moral compass. I know right and wrong, and here's how I'm going to operate. I'm going to go beyond what the law says I have to do to operate right, to do right by people. Plain and simple. It's principles-based leadership. It's the level of expectation your customers have. As we watch the expectation that those customers have and we track it through surveys and questionnaires and a lot of research, we see that how they base their trust on business has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. It used to be that if you gave a good price and good value, you could gain a level of trust. Now, folks want to see more in order to trust you and your business. And it starts with this idea of a principles-based leadership approach. And then it leads into radical transparency for your business. So we hit this idea of openness and transparency twice. And we talk about radical transparency being so crucial for your business. That's what people want to see. It's what the surveys show. It's what the research shows time and time again. Are you being open and transparent with your pricing models, with the way you write contracts? Ask yourself those questions. Am I doing right? Would I want to be on the other side of that contract? Would I want to be on the other side of this negotiation as we put together the business deal? Those are the questions we have to ask ourselves as we think about doing right, going above and beyond. And then finally, we shape the public discourse. What does that mean? That means waking up in the morning with the intent to do what's right isn't enough. That we need to see it in your actions. It means Dale needs to develop the intestinal fortitude to stop the guy in the aisle at Fred Meyer and say, hold on just a second, that's theft, and it's really gross. It's being willing to have the conversation, talking about what's right, having the conversation with your employees, not just saying we live up to the law, but we are going to do better. Here's how we're going to do better. Have the conversations, and then the actions follow what you say and match what you say. That's what we mean when we talk about shape the public discourse, because if we're just quiet as business people, the regulations will keep coming down the pike. That $10,500 you pay per employee per year will just continue to grow. As business owners, we have to be the ones that flap the butterfly wing and create the movement that says we are better. We're doing business a better way. We do right because it's right. And I applaud you and I thank you for doing that day in and day out, because every single thing you do really does matter. Thank you.